Good morning, infant and toddler CDA class. This is Lillian McFarland, and we are starting our first session of online instruction for this semester. I'm really excited. I hope this works out great. This is our first session on our first day, and our topic for this module is communication in early childhood. And we broke the modules into subsections. And our first subsection is language and literacy development. For this section, participants will understand the language and literacy development of infants and toddlers. So the first question is, can babies hear sounds in the womb? I'm sure everybody has seen movies and folks that will put earphones on their belly when they're pregnant or have lovely conversations with the fetus. And I thought this might be interesting to everybody to see what research actually suggests for this. The sources for all of these slides can be found at the end of the presentation. So if there's anything you want to read more about, you can easily look it up back there. So, can babies hear in the womb? Research suggests the fetus actually begins responding to sound between 22 and 24 weeks, but those are only for low frequencies, such as a dog barking. As the auditory system develops, the range increases. Towards the end of pregnancy, the fetus can hear and distinguish between voices. Research also suggests that what the fetus is hearing are vital to future hearing. It says specific parts of the auditory system need noise to develop properly, such as speech and music. Now, the article also mentions that some people believe that you can play your baby classical music while in the womb, and that will help boost IQ. But the first article by Beryl on Medical News Today says that that's not actually a thing. There's no evidence to support that. It might calm you down and help you out, so, not to be discounted, but it will not help the baby. It does mention that the fetus will hear differently in the womb than when they're out of the womb. They said you could try putting your hand over your mouth and try to carry on a conversation that way, and you'll see that you notice tones of voice, but not necessarily the words. And that's what the baby will hear too, because they also have all that fluid, they have your heartbeat, they have digestive noises, all sorts of fun stuff going on in there. Now, even though the baby has a muffled experience of speech in the womb, there is research that shows if you are exposed to prolonged, so for a long time, loud noises, that can contribute to a baby's hearing loss. So let's see, they consider anything louder than 115 decibels, which they said is about the sound of a chainsaw, that you should avoid this as much as possible. One article said by Murkoff, which was in What to Expect When You're Expecting, it says, noise does have the possibility to cause developmental damage or hearing in a growing baby when it's loud, prolonged, and repeated. So if you work somewhere that is quite noisy while you're pregnant, it might be in your best interest to ask for a transfer to a quieter area. All right, what can newborns hear? So we have, over the years, seen baby toys that are specifically in black and white and high contrast. And those are created to help a baby develop their eyesight and to grab their attention. Apparently, newborns can hear quite well. Their hearing originally might have a little bit of fluid, but that clears up very quick, and they are able to hear everything that an adult can hear. So a baby's hearing is fully developed at birth. Before they come home from the hospital, they will have at least one hearing screening. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends this for all newborns. If a newborn is identified by 3 months of age as being hard of hearing or deaf, then they should be enrolled in early intervention and/or treatment by the age of 6 months. On the American Academy of Pediatrics website, healthychildren.org, they mention that you should watch for possible signs of hearing loss as your child grows. Some indicators are that your baby doesn't startle at loud noises or turn towards sounds. The loud noises one is 1 month, and the loud turning towards sounds is 3 or 4 months. Your baby doesn't notice you until he sees you. They concentrate on vibrating noises more than other kinds of sounds, indicating that it might be feeling more than hearing. The child doesn't seem to enjoy being read to. A child slow to begin talking, is difficult to understand, and doesn't say single words such as dada or mama by 12 to 15 months of age. The child seems to hear some sounds but not others. So perhaps they can hear only low-pitched sounds or have hearing loss only in one ear. From the other reference from a children's hospital, it says babies with normal hearing should startle in response to loud sounds, pay quiet attention to a mother's voice, and briefly stop moving when sound at a conversation level is begun. Newborns seem to prefer a higher-pitched voice to a lower-sounding voice. So, in general, the females have a preferential auditory treatment there. How babies communicate. So, if you've been around a baby, I bet you have some ideas about how babies communicate. The little child here, you can see, seems to be waving at you and giving you a smile. So, babies don't start communicating with speech. They can start by providing verbal and nonverbal cues to how they're feeling. They can make sounds, they can cry, they can giggle and laugh. For facial expressions, they're nonverbal. They can make eye contact, they can smile, they can move their arms and legs, and later on they can point and look so you can share looking at the same item. They can gesture when they get older about how they feel, if they want something, if they want to be picked up. That's according to 0 to 3. And in NAEYC, communication milestones are expected around 3 months of age. For hearing, that is, they startle at loud sounds, they quiet or smile when you talk, and they seem to recognize your voice and quiets when crying. For talking, they make cooing sounds, they smile at people, and they have different cries for different needs. So you might notice that a baby has a "I need to be changed" cry versus a "I'd really like you to hold me" cry versus a "I'm very hungry right now, please take care of that" cry. In kidshealth.org, it says that babies are born with the ability to cry, and that's how they communicate for a while. The cries can be identified, and babies can cry for any reason they like, or for no clear reason at all that you can discern. Remember that crying is one way babies can shut out stimuli when they're overloaded. So, just for a little tidbit here, it's common for babies to have a fussy period about the same time every day, usually between early evening and midnight. So, you might think that your baby is crying overly much, and you might say, "Oh, that baby is colicky." Well, I thought you'd like to know that for a colic baby to be diagnosed as so, according to kidshealth.org, When an infant who's otherwise healthy cries for more than 3 hours per day, more than 3 days per week, for at least 3 weeks, then it's a condition known as colic. And it says most children outgrow it by 3 or 4 months of age. How do babies begin to differentiate and develop language specific to their caregivers and their culture? So I have 2 articles for this. The first is Before First Words, and the second is in Psychological Science. So according to these articles, babies are born with the ability to discriminate and perceive all the speech sounds of the entire world's languages. And Before First Words, they say this is about 600 consonants and 200 vowels. Now, depending on what that baby is hearing during their first 6 months of age, their perception will start narrowing so that they can focus in on the sounds, the consonants and vowels that they're consistently hearing their caregivers say. So at 6 months of age, in a process known as perceptual reorganization or perceptual narrowing, babies start to lose their ability to tell the difference if they're not used consistently around them in language, spoken language. Infants don't just discover the sounds of the language of the people speaking to them, they also learn about the sequences in which these sounds occur and how frequently they are used in adult speech. A study found that 9-month-old infants show a preference for words made up of possible sound combinations that sound like things they would find in English. So, nonsense words that sound like English to an English baby would be preferable to actual words spoken in another language. As babies are tuning in and perceptually narrowing, it does come at a cost. As they tune into the language they're hearing around them, they start to lose the ability to hear differences in other languages. So that kind of goes to show you that people that learn a second language as an adult can always be determined by an accent. They can't make the same kinds of sounds that a native speaker can if those sounds aren't found in their language they learned as a child. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about baby sign language, or baby sign. My sources for here are the Mayo Clinic and The Psychologist, Volume 21, Edition 4. So, I don't know if you've seen baby signs in your classrooms, but they are quite popular, and some of the signs are very helpful for interacting with young children, pre-verbal young children. The example here of more is one of the most commonly used baby signs I have seen in a classroom, and the other being all done, which involves waving your hands in the air to indicate that you're all done with that and you're finished now and I'd like to move on to something else. So, there is research for and against baby sign language. However, I find some of these signs quite useful in a classroom to ease frustration between children and their adults. When you teach just a few gestures and consistently use them in tandem with the spoken words, so as you're tapping your fingers together for more, you would tell the child more. So tap more, to let the baby know what you're meaning when you tap your fingers together. Later on, when the baby taps their fingers together, you can ask them, do you want more? And you'll get most likely an affirmative look on their face for it. I've seen these used in infant classrooms and in young toddler classrooms to great effect. In the Mayo Clinic's article, they mention that baby sign can help a typically developing child to communicate several months earlier than those who are just using vocal communication. And they also indicated that children with developmental delays might also benefit from the addition of baby sign to your communication routine. The suggestions for the Mayo Clinic are to set realistic expectations for what your child can learn and what you can teach them in sign language during a period of time. So it says you can feel free to start signing, but remember that most children aren't able to communicate this way until about 8 months old. Keep your signs simple. If you look on the internet, you can find the pictures, such as this card here, that show you some easy gestures that you can use with babies. Choose signs that you think would be of most interest to your child. Choose signs that you think your child would need to communicate with you. So there's no point really in teaching a sign for something the baby's never going to use to communicate. Try to keep it to things that will help ease the communication between you. Start with one sign or a couple and be really consistent in how you use it. So whenever you ask the baby if they want more, tap your fingers together and ask them, do you want more? The importance of adult facial expressions and body language. So one of the takeaways from this presentation should be that depending on the interactions babies have pre and post birth, that determines how their speech develops and the quality of the interactions between the child and the adult. I think it would be quite obvious that the interactions that a baby has, verbal and nonverbal, are just as important as the interactions the adult has, verbal and nonverbal, with the baby. I will be including a link to the Atlanta Speech School's YouTube video here. I'd love everybody to take a look at that and see how easy it is to shift your verbal and nonverbal body language to make a positive impact on a child. Babbling, utterances, and short sentences. By the age of 10 or 12 months, the range of sounds children produce has been somewhat narrowed. Babbling in different cultures takes on the sound characteristics of the languages that surround them. There's usually duplicated syllables like ba, ba, da, da, mama, and most of the world's languages have names of parents that are variants of papa, mama, dada. And these coincide with the articulations babies can make most easily at the end of the first year. First words usually appear between 9 and 15 months. One article mentions that this depends not only on how quick the baby is, but also in the parent's enthusiasm in noticing the sounds the child's making. After months of slow growth, a lot of new words come at once. It usually coincides with the child wondering about what's going on in their world and being able to ask what is going on in their world. That's when you get a "what's that?" every day, perhaps every other minute, and you get the opportunity to label and describe the environment to the child that's asking you. It's estimated that children can learn around 9 new words a day from the age of 2 years old up to 18 years Children learn best by speaking with somebody that is an accomplished speaker of their language, and they don't tend to learn much by passively taking in talk through the radio or the television or the internet. It needs to be something that they are providing feedback, the adult is providing feedback, their speaking partners providing feedback, and it's really interactive. Most toddlers produce a 2-word sentence between 18 and 24 months, and at that time they usually have between 50 and 500 words in their vocabulary. Before they're able to do this, they usually are able to string together simple words with a space between them to get their point across. The article suggests that a child could say, book, mine, read. That doesn't count as a sentence because of the spaces in between the children's speech. Piaget, schemas and overgeneralizations. So if you remember our chat about different educational theorists last time we met, we talked about Jean Piaget and his theories about how young children learned. His theories also apply to children learning vocabulary. As children are learning the meaning of words, such as perhaps you have a cat in the house, and the child has asked you what it is, and you say cat. You may give the cat's name. Maybe the cat's name is Molly, and the child may overgeneralize or apply what they know about Molly to all furry, four-legged creatures. So later on, when they look out the window and see a furry, four-legged creature eating a nut in a tree, they may say, Molly. That is an overgeneralization. A child might call all men daddy. They might call all animals cat. They might call all round objects ball. Others also undergeneralize. So they might only call your cat Molly. And there are no other Mollys in the world, and that is the only Molly. Perhaps they call your cat cat, and no other creature in the world is considered a cat to them because it doesn't look quite the same and it's not Molly. This is less likely to happen, but has been noticed. When children learn new vocabulary words, one of the things that can often happen is when they learn a new word, they use that word to refer to the whole object rather than a property of the object. So, if you are looking out the window with your child and see the squirrel, if you say, look, it's gray, they will assume that you are speaking about the whole object. You're referring to the name of that object as gray. So usually when they're learning descriptive words or things that apply to a part of an object or a texture or a shape, that usually is learned after they learn a whole object name. So the child would learn squirrel before they would start to assume that the different words that you're using to describe the squirrel also apply. Now, depending on how much talk children hear, that has a huge impact on the amount of vocabulary they accumulate. According to 0 to 3 and NAEYC, children's vocabularies are often linked to their economic background. By 3 years of age, there is a study done that said there's about a 30 million word gap between children from the wealthiest and poorest families. A recent study shows that this vocabulary gap is evident even in toddlers. This can happen simply due to the amount of different words that a child can hear on a daily basis. Usually, according to a study by Betty Hart, an average child of a lower socioeconomic status or working class can hear between 616 to 1,251 words per hour. And that's less than 1/3 that a child from a professional family may be hearing. So this is important because as a teacher, the more you talk to your children and the more you vary your words and the more that you lay on different vocabulary and different descriptions and make a really rich verbal environment for the children, you are there to overlay and stimulate their vocabulary growth. Things you can do to help children enrich their vocabularies are to use new and interesting words in natural conversations. So during meal times, you can describe the food, you can describe how it tastes. Use your gestures and your facial expressions to help children make sense of new words. If you're joyful, then you need to act joyful. If you use the word exuberant or happy, then you need to show what that looks like. Sing with the children, recite poetry, do finger plays and rhymes. Also, be a mediator and encourage children to talk with one another. You can keep the conversation going by rephrasing what the children are saying and acting as a go-between in making comments and asking them to share their ideas. Read to children daily. Talk about the meanings of the words in the book. Look for books with illustrations that provide clues to what the words are. And one thing that I also enjoy doing is if you're learning a new vocabulary word and it's new for you too, feel free to post it around the room a couple places so that you can have the opportunity to work it into conversation as the opportunity presents itself. So here's the bibliography of the sources used in this presentation. I'm going to flip through slowly, and if you'd like, you can come back and pause on this area and take a look at some of these resources online to learn more about how language, literacy, hearing develop in early childhood. Thank you for sticking with me through this half-hour session. I can't wait to continue this class with you and have everybody get their CDA by the end of this semester. Have a great afternoon.